Assalamualaikum and good morning. My name is Fakir Hadis and I'm from the Bukit Jelutong community. Um, from the Bukit Jelutong community, and we organize our monthly Bukit Jelutong talks, or we also call them VJ talks. So I'm from Bukit Jelutong Shah Alam, and we are back here on this fine Sunday morning for another round of talks. This time with our none other than Encik Shahzad, uh, Encik Shahzad from our secretary of the Bukit Jelutong Residents Association. So I will give a short brief biodata about Encik Shahzad. And Encik Shahzad is presently the head of card for Boost. Prior to that, he was the head of the Macro Innovation Center in Malaysia. Encik Shahzad has a wealth of expertise covering many industries, including banking and financing. And he has been firstly running a payment system regulated body as a CAO, covering brands such as Max Cash and the Islamic Payment Switch, before setting up a specialist payment processing company known as Incap Sedan Berhad. Serving this company serves international payment networks such as Mastercard and international payment switching implementations with several Malaysian financial institutions. As a lawyer turned technologist, he had also created waves by being the first Southeast Asian company to certify itself under EMV code. Level 2 for kernel payment technologies over three major operating systems. Encik Shahzad has also even designed his own crypto PC under a 2011 MOU with Intel, which aimed to secure payments using environments and chipsets. Encik Shahzad is a certified blockchain solution architect and a certified Takful professional and a certified Google Cloud digital leader. He uses his deep passion and understanding in the technology space, mindful that the financial services spaces are highly regulated. Encik Shahzad uses a legal mind to define and design how technology should be positioned. He is also an Arduino rapid prototyping enthusiast and amateur woodworker. Um, so that's a very interesting background you have, Encik Shahzad. And I see that we today you will be having a talk about the introduction to the blockchain, right? So
Right, that's
that
right.
is yeah. And without further ado, let's get started. And the studio is yours, Shahzad.
Hey, thank you, Farhan. Excited to be here this morning. Good morning, everyone. Happy Vesak Day to all who's celebrating, and since it's still Shawwal, Selamat Hari Raya, Maaf Zahir Batin. Thank you to the Bukit Jelutong Residents Association for having these monthly talks, and so that the community can benefit from these talks. And we have a myriad of talks from different subject matter experts. And today we'll be talking about blockchain. So without further ado, let's get into it. So this is actually blockchain for beginners, right? So hopefully I'd be taking you through the very basics, and by the end of the session be able to plant the concept in your mind so that you'd be able to understand it at a level that um, you'd be able to appreciate what's going on in society today, and where it's going, where the technology is largely going, and where the use cases might be. All right. So, a bit about me. I've been a lawyer in legal practice, specializing in technology and finance for 7 years. Then I was in fintech for 15 years, spanning largely payment systems and financial services innovation. I'm a certified blockchain solution architect. I'm a certified Takaful professional, and I'm a certified Google Cloud digital leader, right? And without further ado, let's talk about the blockchain questions that make us all confused. First and foremost, what is a blockchain? It's also used interchangeably with distributed ledger technology, or DLT. And so we want to find out what that is. What is cryptocurrency? And what are the differences between blockchain and cryptocurrency? Because there is, and a lot of people are confused. They think that it's one and the same. That's not entirely true. While all cryptocurrency, well, most if not all, use a blockchain network, blockchain can exist as a technology for a myriad of use cases without cryptocurrency. And I think today's talk would be more centered around that blockchain as a utility rather than cryptocurrency. But we'll talk about the differences as well. Why is blockchain as a technology gaining popularity and momentum? And of course, why is it important to me or to us, right? Let's take a step back. These are really, really big words. Everybody throws these words around like blockchain and cloud. And it really takes a lot of patience, especially if you're not grounded in technology, to appreciate and to understand it. So let's talk about the very basics, and I'll tell you a story. So once upon a time, there was an island called Yap, and on this island lived the Yappy people, right? And they had this strange currency called rice stones, which weighed hundreds of kilograms and it couldn't be moved around, right? Of course, because they were big boulders. So they would then leave these stones wherever they were and they traded them using mental ledgers. So, okay, Alice owns that stone and Bob owns that particular boulder over there. And all tribe members would then keep a mental ledger in their head as to who owned which boulder or who owned which stone. Now, everyone who owned which rice stone at any time on the island, if they wanted to transact, then they would announce that transaction to the tribe, and everybody who kept that mental ledger would update their mental ledgers, right? And then, everyone would just go about living their daily lives. So that's basically the notion of currency that they had. And of course, you couldn't pick up these stones and carry them around. So they'd leave them where they were. Okay, so in a sense, it actually decouples ownership and possession. While I do own that stone, I may not possess it. It is still there in the middle of the field, right? So the Yappies could have kept a single ledger, just like a bank. Now, a bank is like a central single entity. So it is like only one tribe member would keep an account or ledger of all transactions for that tribe. But just think, if it was a single person and a central authority, then this person or central authority would have to be very trustworthy, as the entire tribe would have to trust them as the record keeper. Now, funnily enough, this is very akin and close to the Islamic prophetic character of Al Amin, or the trustworthy one. But let's just move on. Okay, so now, because this person would have to be very trustworthy, to be able to keep everybody's records. If that particular ledger was corrupted, changed by any means, then wealth would be lost or even gained unfairly. And another important point with the centralized system was that if the record keeper was not there, or became ill, was not present, died, then no transactions could take place. Now this was a single point of failure in the system. Now, think about it. That's why maybe banks have single data centers, and from these data centers, they actually replicate these sites to create disaster recovery areas, because essentially it's still a single point of failure in the system, meaning one database, although you could have multiple replications of that database across various sites for purposes of disaster recovery. But then again, the principle of blockchain allows this kind of fault tolerance by decentralizing that ledger. So now, with a decentralized ledger, nobody has to trust anyone else. And a trustless environment is assumed from the beginning, as all members have a copy of the same ledger, regardless of if they know each other. Now, this is the principle on why it's powerful over the internet, because over the internet nobody knows anybody else, nobody trusts each other, and you therefore have to create transaction based regimes that work on a zero trust environment. Okay, so this decentralized ledger or system, let's think about it. Let's say some of the members of the tribe who updated the mental ledger are not there. and or it's become corrupt or incomplete, or some of the tribe members got COVID and was in isolation. It's okay, because when they come back, they can update their mental ledgers, and then everybody can be in sync. All right. So as long as we have more than 51% of the tribe members voting on a particular transaction, we know that it's good, because that's the concept of decentralization. As long as the majority of nodes say it's good, then it's good. So each tribe member is a node within the network, as it were. Okay, a bit of a disclaimer. That's not a picture of the Yapese people. It's not a picture of Byzantines as well. It's some random villagers of the internet, right? So, stones at the bottom of the sea. Think about it. One day, the Yapese were carrying a new stone back to their island, and it sank in the harbor. But the tribe decided to add it to the register or the ledger anyway, and trade it just like any other stone, even though it was at the bottom of the sea and it was untouchable physically. I mean, they could not move it. So the Yappies established a key principle of blockchain, meaning that belongs to me, although I can't touch it, but I can trade it. It's a store value of something, or perceived store value at least, and I'm able to now exchange and use it as a medium of exchange of that particular stored value. So that's essentially making it cryptocurrency, right? And but then again, that's how blockchain works. So to understand the mechanics of blockchain, we can look at what makes a bank in a modern economy successful. So a bank takes deposits and issues credits, which also decouples possession and ownership. I mean, you may own the money in the bank, but you don't possess it. Would that cash be in a bank vault? Likely not. It's all digits in a computer today. So that bank provides that trustable ledger to all parties, recording all deposits and credits. So the bank also acts as a trust broker when two parties who don't trust each other want to trade. That's the concept of a letter of credit. That two parties who don't trust each other or don't know each other then elects a bank as a trust broker to carry out that exchange. So in a sense, a decentralized ledger provides the same benefits as a bank, except the bank is a central authority and is a single point of failure. That's really the benefit of looking at blockchain, and using the bank as an example to understand. Okay. Now moving on, why do we call it a blockchain? So let's say all transactions are recorded on paper, and each sheet of that paper has 25 lines. When the sheet is filled up, all that 25 transactions, the tribe would validate the transactions on that current page. So everyone agrees to what's on that page essentially. Now, if the majority of the tribe agree that the 25 transactions are all the same and it's good, it's validated via that group consensus. So all imagine all of them would basically sign at the bottom of the page, if you like, to validate it. And once it's been validated, it's added to the stack of previously validated sheets. And so each sheet on the stack can be assumed to be trustworthy because each sheet is validated. And it can't be changed because those sheets were linked together through a, if you like, a cryptograph. And we'll come to that in a while, but that's essentially what makes it a blockchain, because you put all of that data into a particular data block on that sheet, and you link those sheets together, and you cannot now break in between sheets for you to append a new sheet. No, it does not work that way because it's all linked. So therefore, this principle allows blockchain to be known as immutable and renders it hack proof. Well, at least until quantum computers come into the fray. But essentially, it is extremely secure because through this methodology of linking these sheets together, you aren't able to break that chain. And that's essentially why it's called a blockchain. So let's study this a bit more. Okay. Now, of course, if you were to look at a particular sheet, as I mentioned just now, that particular sheet of paper, and we are basically saying all these sheets are validated. Let's say each sheet of paper is equal to a block. And so the act of embedding a previous block of information to that current block of information is called chaining. So hence the name blockchain. So to chain blocks together, and I was mentioning about that just now, all data in a block is run through a special function called a cryptographic hash. So cryptographic hash is actually just like a unique password. And so there are two parts of this password. And if you were to break up that password and you make one public and you make one private, then that's essentially what is known as a cryptographic hash. And to link or chain blocks of data together, the header of, well, one part of the password of the previous block, okay, contains a part of the next block and of the recent block. So changing the data on any block in the blockchain will result in a completely different hash and that new hash not matching the preceding block. So you can't fake it, you can't change it, and it gives its property of immutability and it makes it highly censorship resistant. As a record keeper, it is at the zenith of technology today as far as record keeping. So, if you were to use blockchain as, if you like, a robotic record keeper, you could essentially never go wrong. All right. So, now you might not understand this, but let's maybe just take a step back and I'll explain. So, let's have an easy example. So, perhaps you have in block one, the government issues you title to a piece of land. In block two, that piece of land, which was perhaps agriculture in designation, you change to commercial, and that's the transaction. Block 3 is the transaction where that title, which has changed from agriculture to commercial, is now being sold to a third party. What happens then? Well, if you wanted to link the transaction together in a blockchain, you take two parts of the password and on every sheet be actually putting parts of the password in one sheet and parts of the same password in the next sheet and so on and so forth in a little daisy chain so that that particular ledger cannot be broken. What does this show you? This shows you that this is extremely good for track and trace or traceability or datability of anything. If we wanted to look at the traceability and auditability of anything, blockchain is superior because of this. So similarly, if this was a car you own and block one was the transaction where you bought the car from the dealer and the car was then on sold twice, we would still then be able to track the origination of the car, as it were. This is extremely useful and important in the world of arts, maybe, and in the world of intellectual property, where you would need provenance. And the word provenance actually relates to the traceability and the origination of a particular asset. All right. So moving on, blockchain as a concept started when an anonymous fellow, well, we don't really know whether it's a fellow, it's a group. He, she, they are still anonymous. And they are called Satoshi Nakamoto. And blockchain began as an idea documented in a white paper by this anonymous Satoshi Nakamoto. And the ideas outlined in the white paper led to the world's first and largest blockchain, which is Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin at its heart is a blockchain as a record keeper that records the transfer of tokens, and you can call that token a coin. Okay. And it is a perceived store value of wealth, which is decentralized. So Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies such as Ethereum, Cardano, Ripple, and all are current examples of this. This many, many today. Now, blockchains provide a successful enabling platform for cryptocurrency by providing a digital, immutable ledger that is widely distributed and peer validated. So that's what you call miners, right? People who basically validate the entire network as a chain and as nodes. So, as each of these above mentioned cryptocurrencies exists on its own blockchain, they cannot be directly exchanged except if using cross chain technology. So, Bitcoin is on its own ledger and Ethereum is on its own ledger. Now, they cannot be directly exchanged on the same chain, but they are now new cross chain technologies like Matic and Polygon and so on and so forth. So it is critically important to note that blockchain does not require currency, and many exciting and compelling use cases exist which require no special currency, coin, or token. I'm more largely interested in that. So you'd see this B a lot. That B does not stand for a blockchain. That B that looks like a dollar sign is actually the Bitcoin logo. It has nothing to do with blockchain, although Bitcoin does work on blockchain. So maybe today we can use this opportunity to solve this confusion that Bitcoin is not necessarily blockchain, and blockchain is not necessarily Bitcoin, but Bitcoin works on blockchain. All right. So, with that, let's look at the use cases. Blockchain is a record keeping system, as I mentioned, that can record transactions of importance that are non monetary. And think about it, you could record transfer of ownership. You could update medical records because, I mean, heaven forbid if someone could change, hack a medical record which was centrally kept. You know, if I could insert something in your medical record which said that you were not allergic to something when you were allergic to something, and if you were in the hospital and they gave you the wrong food or pharmaceuticals, something evil could happen. And this is just, paraphrasing in our minds the importance of a single point of failure and why it's necessary to mitigate that, especially when things are very susceptible to compromise in the world of technology today. And if governments and enterprise are not at the zenith of cybersecurity, then extremely bad things could happen. So let's move on. So you could even do a course in a university or in a learning center, and that certificate or degree could be part of the blockchain, and it could then record your graduation, and to be left there for all posterity. So therefore, you could not fake a degree or unfake it if you like because it's there in a public chain. Now, of course, blockchains could be open, public, permission, private, and all of this could be set. But generally, the key benefits of a blockchain arise when it's largely open and permission. So the three types of blockchain transactions are when two or more parties exchange a monetary value, such as cryptocurrency. Okay, that's obvious, right? But let's move on. But when two or more parties exchange not a monetary value, but there's an update to medical records, a hospital, updating your medical record, or or an authority saying that you own a particular piece of asset, a car, a land title, if you like. And also, it could be one party announcing an important event, such as in supply chain management, which is, well, this is this particular sack of grains from this particular farm, and it's been stored in this particular silo, in this particular warehouse, and it's then been moved and exported through these particular ports and carried on these particular ships and containers with these relevant insurance and quality certificates, and that's how you basically trace from farm to fork. Now, obviously, you could do the same thing for any kind of business process automation, and because it's essentially creating an immutable audit trail of anything that you like, well, really, it'll need to be something that's important to society for it to be in a blockchain. But then again, you could really just use it for financial records. And I think that's where its first use case actually appeared in cryptocurrency. But if you look at it, the sky is the limit in terms of this technology. As I mentioned, let's go through some of these boxes. Yeah. Supply chain management, product tracking, non tampering, improve transparency, isolate problems easily, authenticity and verifiability, cost reduction. So, insurance, automate insurance with faster approach, easy claims, better information, access, and it removes a mediator to a certain extent. I'd like to give you a real case. So I worked for an insurance company not too long ago, and that was a case in Singapore, really, where it was a situation where we had used blockchain. And you basically buy online a policy to say that if you were diagnosed with something, then we would create an immediate payout to your account without the need for you to claim. So we called that parametric insurance. We use blockchain. And the moment that you had bought the policy on your smartphone, if you were diagnosed through any GP in Singapore, that would basically create a trigger in the blockchain for us to pay directly into your account without any human intervention. So that was basically launched, and it was a good test case of blockchain in insurancy. Nothing to do with cryptocurrency, but completely utilitarian for society, improved efficiency, and enabled us to do things that we couldn't do before. So in healthcare, we could use it to improve in terms of the storage of that particular data and that immutability. I think I mentioned just now, if your medical records could be hacked, it's an extremely dangerous value proposition. Cryptocurrency, I think you know the use case of that already. Asset tokenization, you could actually take any asset, create a token that resemble the intellectual property of that asset, and then be able to then move that token to say this is the title to that particular asset. So you could leave Mona Lisa in the Louvre in the museum in France, and you could create a non-fungible token, an NFT. That's what it means, to say, well, this is the title to the Mona Lisa. It stays at the Louvre in France, but the title can now change from party to party because it's now a digital asset. So they could be real world assets that you create the titles as tokens, or they could be digital assets that exist in the digital space that then is turned into a token. So either way, it works. So, as a notary system, blockchain is extremely important. So, you would appreciate, I am a lawyer by legal profession who has been in financial technology. So, I just happen to have this, I would say, the two sufficient worlds that actually understand why blockchain is important for society, that you need to basically, where, if you like, consideration or money proves a contract or an exchange between two parties. And if you could capture that exchange, and that exchange is now auditable and immutable, in terms of evidence of contracts, it is extremely superior. And that's why I appreciate it. And you could use it for all kinds of notary services, real estate, digital identity. I think I spoke about track and trace from farm to fork, where we're using it in farms. Today, for music, they're turning music intellectual property into NFTs. I think you've all seen that with art. That's the big one right now. Of course, there's a lot of hype behind it because people don't really understand, but that's really attached to copyright and royalty protection, where you could actually leave the possession of an asset somewhere, but yet still be able to own it. And again, banking, cybersecurity, sky is the limit, as I mentioned. Happy to take questions. You can actually then put the questions that you have in the chat, and I'll come back to answer them whenever I can. Right? Okay, just a bit about cryptocurrency, since I think there would have been some of you that may have joined this talk on the fact that maybe I would be speaking about cryptocurrency. Well, I wouldn't like to, but since this is about blockchain, it's only fair that we say something about cryptocurrency. So, blockchain can be an event tracking system where announcements and events can be actionable through the use of smart contracts. So these are not your regular contracts where you have legal agreements. They're actually just pieces of software code that say certain things. So essentially, they're very if statements, if else statements in firmware, if you like, where if something happens, do this. Um, if not, don't do this, right? That's really a smart contract, which are software program events. And by using these software program events, you could actually create a workflow platform by writing rules around these events. And Ethereum, which is one of the cryptocurrency brands out there, has established an industry standard for perusing these smart contracts. So you could actually use the public Ethereum network, although it's cryptocurrency, to run your own blockchain. Yep, it's absolutely true. And it is available for mostly everyone who knows how to do it, because in nature, Ethereum is open source. So it is available for everyone. And because it is a public blockchain platform, you could actually write on the Ethereum network to run non cryptocurrency blockchain. So back to cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is a volatile digital currency that uses blockchain as a secure ledger. Blockchain allows Bitcoin to be completely decentralized and using peer-to-peer basis. So how does it work? Well, it just runs on a series of cryptographic hashes, as I mentioned before, which is like you have a password and you break the password into two. You take one part, you basically hold one part, and for the next fellow that you want to make this transfer to, you give them the other part. All right, and that's essentially how it works. And so if Bob wanted to use Bitcoin and transfer some to Alice, Bob only has to provide his public key, and Alice could then initiate that transaction. And that public key would now verify Alice, and then it would look at the appropriate amount of Bitcoin and then allow that transaction to be passed. But who passes the transaction? Well, these nodes around the network act as notary services and stamping on this. Remember that particular sheet? So in that sheet, there's this transaction where Bob pays Alice, and all the nodes actually validate that sheet and give it their stamp of approval. And these nodes are called miners. And for providing all of this computational service, they get paid a small fee, which comes from the tokens themselves, although it's not very much, but it is today a burgeoning industry. And as you know, Bitcoin uses GPUs, graphical processor units, for providing computational power in validating these transactions, and it uses a lot of power, and there's a lot of hue and cry about it today. But by no measure is Bitcoin's power consumption more than today in terms of central banks and banks managing money from all of their bank branches to their computers to their ATM machines to their point of sales networks. Yeah, people are complaining about Bitcoin's computational power aspect, but they fail to realize real money and how much power that's drawing as well. Okay, it's a bit of an unfair situation. Nevertheless, steps have been taken right now where they are now moving away from using computational power and burning up energy. um, to validate cryptocurrency transactions. That's a talk for another day if you'd like to learn more. Okay, um, let's not run into this because then it's a bit complicated. But I wanted to speak about proof of work consensus. So that computational power is known as proof of work, and today Ethereum is moving towards proof of stake. And proof of stake does not use a lot of energy, and it is in hope that standards would change and the Byzantine fault tolerance consensus mechanism to make sure that the ledger is always immutable can be done in ways that don't involve the burning of a lot of energy and would be more sustainable for the future. Right. Moving on, winds of change today, because today we have a token economy born out of payment technology. And what is a token economy? So today you need to understand a digital asset is today called a token. And a token, there are three parts to a token. There is a regular value token, then there is a utility token, and then there is a non-fungible token. So let's take a step back and understand the meaning. A value token is, for example, 1 ringgit can be exchanged for any other 1 ringgit. Okay, one coin, 10 cents, can be exchanged for any other coin of 10 cents. And even if that note was serialized, a 10 ringgit note, you would still be able to exchange it for another 10 ringgit note. So that's a value token. They're the same, they can be exchanged. A non fungible token is when one token does not equal another token. So, for example, you went to university and you got a degree. That degree, if turned into a token, is not the same as any other token that you could create. It is unique to itself. Therefore, it is non fungible. So that draws that acronym NFT. It actually stands for non fungible token, where this particular asset is unique to itself and it cannot be exchanged for any other token. So it's not like when you go to an arcade and then you exchange 10 ringgit and they give you a whole bunch of tokens to put into their particular machines, and one token can be used on different machines. Well, that's a value token really, where one token can be exchanged for another. But that's not the case with a non-fungible token, where that token cannot be exchanged for another token. So the latest hype and buzz in the world is that if you could trade non-fungible tokens, then perceived value to it could be really, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It is really um, a market based on consented buyer and consented seller, if you like. A utility token is issued for miners usually, or for nodes validating transactions or providing group consensus. Okay, and that's a utility token. So for well, it's a service, and for this service they get paid. So the nodes get paid through utility tokens. The smart contract is actually just a process that codifies the exchange of the asset within the chain in a transaction, and the blockchain is itself that shared, trusted, and time-stamped distributed source of truth of that digital asset. Why is it distributed? Well, it's distributed across all of the nodes. You take one node down, it's still going to be alive because it's distributed all across. Imagine if you had a bank and they had all of your records and they were in one place with a disaster recovery in a certain particular other place, and both sides went down. What would happen to your ledger? It would cease to exist. So this is the reason why blockchain was born, because nobody really trusts anyone anymore, and the notion of you trusting governments and trusting banks, as we can see today largely in certain parts of the world, I would not want to name any countries, but as you can see, that trust is in a deficit. And because trust is in a deficit, more and more blockchain becomes a utilitarian tool for anything really in terms of record keeping anything. Imagine if it was used for voting. You would not have a case of cheating. Imagine if it was used for keeping land records. You would not have land fraud. Imagine if you could use it to basically um, every time your car goes for a maintenance run or for a service job, then it's recorded in the blockchain, and we would have provenance of that particular car from the first time it was bought and through its entire service history. This would change the way the world works, and uh, provide better transparency, auditability, and most importantly, immutability. All right. So now, in conclusion, is this important to me? And as I mentioned, as society becomes more digital, blockchain becomes a tool for establishing transactions in an environment where no one trusts each other. Do you think that this trust will increase anytime soon? Well, I doubt it. And it's because of that this particular piece of technology and its different permutations over time, I suspect, would be increasingly important for us as a society. And with that, we've reached the end. I would now go to your questions and answers. Maybe just look at the chat. We have Dr. Fazila Alauddin, MOH, and she says the COVID 19 vaccine cert is on blockchain. Now, is that not fantastic? Think about it. What a wonderful job by the Ministry of Health and representatives there who have put our vaccination cert on the blockchain. What does that mean? It means it's immutable. No one can say we didn't get our vaccine. It's tracked to us. And it's all its certificate numbers, batch numbers, and of course to that particular appropriate person. So they've been tracking that particular vaccine and who it goes into on a blockchain so that it's immutable, it stays there forever, and no one can hack it or fake it, right? So that's excellent. Thank you, Dr. Fazila, for that. Datin Sivamani Rasya says, artworks are being now sold as digital assets, I hear. More artists find it more lucrative to sell as digital art, I hear. That's true, Datin. But remember just now, there were two parts to this. You could actually have a physical painting, put it on your own wall, create a digital title to it, and sell off the digital title and say, look, whenever you want to come up and pick up the real one, it's entirely up to you. Do you want to leave it here? It still belongs to you. Then there's that other part where you actually create that piece of art digitally. I mean, you use it using, computer software programs like Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, Microsoft Paint, even, you see all these little pixel art. You could literally use very simple, uh, software tools to do this, and then yeah, sell it as digital art. So there are two parts. Blockchain for physical arts and artifacts actually present the best form of tracking its provenance. So you could say this art piece, 100 years from now, you'd be able to track a particular art piece even though it changed hands, you know 20, 30, 50, 60, 70 times even, right? And think about it. If you wanted to increase that potential, you could actually say, okay, this painting was so expensive, I'd like to track the frame that it's on and put a tamper proof Bluetooth tag, QR tag on that frame. And the frame is itself in its own blockchain attached to that particular piece of art, that when that piece of frame was changed 20 transactions away, I would know about it and actually know when the frame was changed. Okay, forget about what happened to that piece of art. You could actually attach many things to it. Let's move on. Samsung A9 Pro, there's no name, okay. Blockchain enables multifunctional facilities with appropriate audit trails and reduce fraud within the system. Am I right to say this? Yes, you are very, very right. Um, why is that so? Well, remember the first principle that you were linking each block to another block by taking a password, breaking that password into two, taking one part, putting it on the preceding block and the next part on the other block. And you're doing that in a daisy chain that you could not kill a particular block, change a particular block. If you wanted to change a rule, suppose you wrote the wrong smart contract, you wrote the wrong code, you deployed it up to the chain. Are you able to take it down and replace it? No, you cannot. This is the principle of immutability. What can you do? Well, you can create a new link to the chain to say, I'm changing the rules, but it's still part of the chain. That will then reference to other parts of the chain. Okay, so Bitcoin, if you like, can be traced to its origin or its original Genesis block. They use the term Genesis block. It's very biblical to say that's the beginning, that's the origin. Cryptocurrency, would you encourage senior citizens to engage in this? This is a very interesting question. Senior citizens um, may have a lot of time on their hands, may be interested to look at this um, as a store value, medium of exchange, trading potential. Yes, you can, but eyes wide open. It is very unlike currency that you know as a stored value. Currency that you know as a stored value, and I don't know how senior you are, who's ever asked this question. Depends on how senior you are. For some people, gold is that best stored value. For some people, property, real estate is that best stored value. For some people, it could be bonds, stocks, unit trusts. But for some people, they would actually say, imagine it's that arcade where you go, you take 10 ringgit and or $10 and you exchange for these bunch of tokens, and you could use these tokens on any machine in that arcade. You know what? Some kids live in that arcade perpetually. So if you find the same people who live in that arcade, well, those tokens have perceived value for people who live in that arcade, right? So buyer beware, caveat emptor, to each his own. Would I encourage it? I would encourage it if you're extremely technology savvy, if you're reading on particular current affairs of what's going on. Otherwise, stick with better stored value of money. Well, money is itself a stored value of wealth. So that perceived stored value of wealth, you need to be comfortable with your perceived stored value of wealth. Okay, I think that doesn't go against the grain of what intrinsically we've been brought up as an Eastern society, right? Fahim Mubin, is there an age limit to use blockchain or cryptocurrency? Can young adults and teenagers use this? Yes. Why? Well, think about it. It exists in a land that does not have a law, and that land is called the internet. Okay? Except you live in Malaysia. If you were in Malaysia and you have a certain age to contract, which is you need to be 18 years old to be able to pay somebody and for you to be paid and for that payment to be considered valid or legal. Um, yes, in Malaysia, there is an age limit. A cryptocurrency, well, there are several cryptocurrency exchanges licensed by the Securities Commission of Malaysia. That too, there is a legal age limit. You would need to adhere to that age limit. If you are in a different country where we did not have such rules and where the internet is open to everyone, then I would say yes, you would be able to engage, trade, buy, sell cryptocurrency um, as a person who does not have the legal age of majority. But I say that with a big disclaimer um, that every country has got its own contractual laws when it comes to legal age. So while you can transact, you might not have recourse to that transaction. Meaning, if something goes wrong, would you be able to seek recourse on it? Chances are no. Why? Because you were below that legal age. So if something went wrong, you'd have problems recovering from that position. So I thought I'd put that out there just for you to know that yes, in international waters, while you can do that and there's freedom, there are repercussions. You do need to be careful. All minors who are listening to this, please get consent of your parents or your guardian who is of legal age before you want to get into this, and always keep them abreast and make sure that they know what you're up to. All right. How can we access our COVID-19 certificate in the blockchain system? I think I wouldn't have the answer to that, but I have a feeling that because it's on a blockchain, um, it is now accessible through your My Sejahtera app. So the app probably has got a micro service or a web service layer that basically talks to that blockchain and picks it up from there and serves it up to you in your phone. I would suspect that's the case. If there's another security zone in between, there might be a few layers of that. Yes. um so that's it. We are at 11:52, 8 minutes under, and there are no more questions. Happy to take more questions if you have.
Hi, Shahzad. Hi.
Hi.
Good. Thank you very much for that interesting talk. Actually, I have a question too. Right now,
Sure.
I'm studying economics in A levels actually. So I too am very interested in like what's happening in the future of cryptocurrency and like the NFTs you mentioned. And I've actually read this interesting thing where back in the day they would say when you buy stocks and bonds, you retire at the age of 60. And then when you invest into cryptocurrency, you retire at the age of 30. And then when you get an ownership of NFTs, you retire by next month. So that is one of these articles I read that I found very amusing. So, as an economics student, I just wanted to ask you about what do you think of the future of cryptocurrency and how do you think it will affect the liquidity of money?
That's a very difficult question. It is an extremely loaded, extremely deep, would take days and days. Perhaps we need to do a part two, part three, part four just for that question. Because you've got conventional money, which is fiat in nature and built on the capital reserve system that's been largely in place for the past 100 years, controlled by central regimes and central banks. Because it's legal tender, it needs to be recognized and guaranteed by sovereign bodies. Cryptocurrency doesn't give you this. Although today you've got central banks who have actually announced their decision to move into central bank digital currencies. That actually points towards the direction of the future, where that sovereign authority who issues and guarantees legal tender, and if they were to get into digital currencies as the basis of a stored value and medium of exchange, then that future is promising for cryptocurrency. We also see more countries regulating it when it used to be largely in a very unregulated space. Now, this is to ensure that there is adequate protection for people and citizens when they deal with such things. But therefore, it's got to be controlled. And in Malaysia, it's controlled by the Securities Commission, and through them, they issue licenses for digital asset exchanges and services that provide for digital assets. And it's important that we use such frameworks so that we could actually maintain the security and sanctity of such monetary regimes. Left to the market and its susceptibility uh, um, to play, um, then cryptocurrency would continue. You would need to maintain the the position where nobody can take a cartel or control over 51% of node validation in any cryptocurrency.
I see. Yeah.
If you could fake that group consensus mechanism of any cryptocurrency, that's the day that cryptocurrency should go away and should cease to exist, because then it doesn't give you any value in terms of that decentralized control. Okay, so uh it depends. Let's come back to that last slide that I have. I'll ask that question to you again, Farhan. What do you think? This one. What do you think is going to happen to society? Do you think crypto is going to be more promising? I don't know. Would
Mm,
society trust each other more? If society trusts each other more, then you won't have it. If society continues not to trust each other, then we're going to have more things like it.
yeah.
Okay?
Well, actually, over internationally, there have been a lot of businesses and clubs who are starting to accept cryptocurrency slowly. But what I see is actually I've been looking into it recently also, and I've seen that buying some stuff online, they also accepted cryptocurrency, but there's certain problem with it, like when you try to transfer it to somebody, they usually transfer it to personal accounts, not business accounts, basically. And then when you try to get back these currencies back, it's very difficult to reverse the transaction currently. So that's why I think like at the moment the people who are in charge of the cryptocurrency platform should maybe find ways to make this more advanced in the future.
The quick answer to your question, Farhan, and perhaps just as a comment, is that you can't run away from that, because um, the situation is today you're giving someone an email address. He sends that email to you, you receive that email. Are you able to basically take that email back from him sending it to you and him now sending that email to someone else? No, you already received that email, right? So that wallet address that exists in cryptocurrency is like an email address. You'll need to be very careful with it. When you send money into a particular address, how would you now reverse it? But that's the whole point of blockchain. You don't want to reverse it because it's immutable. If you wanted to reverse it, you'd have to create another transaction and then put it on the chain. You can create a smart contract in there to say, I'm reversing that transaction that was preceding in the chain. You can do that. You cannot reverse transaction of something that's already in the chain. You would need to have another transaction, append that to the chain to reverse the earlier one. Clear?
Yeah, I understand. Okay, to finish off, I actually have one more question about cryptocurrency. And why does the value go up and down? Like, is it related to like inflation?
Ah, right now, it's related to a correction. And this particular, there's a crash right now, and that crash is, I would attribute to several things. One is that you have got crypto being used as the basis of um, Well, we're on the internet and it's live, so I'll be very careful with my words. It's being used as the basis of different powers in the world positioning themselves. It's being used as the basis for different big business and big tech to raise money and run billions of deals uh, from the public. It's being used to even today. Look, you want to buy a graphics card? It's really, really expensive. Why? Because they're all being used for mining Bitcoin or mining other cryptocurrencies. So even that's really cartelish, right? Wouldn't you say? So that's why we're having this correction right now. This correction is necessary to maintain the hegemony of that whole, hey, this is the internet, it's free, cryptocurrency doesn't belong to anyone, it is now up to the market forces. But it reacts and responds this way when what happens? When cartels try to get into it, governments try to get into it, big business tries to get into it, and all three parties will fight for control over it. This particular correction then happens. Okay.
But is it like a gain to the public economy? Because like as it's been like as it has crashed, I've noticed a lot of cryptocurrencies have gone down in value recently in the past few days. So is it like a good time to invest into it right now?
Ah,
As it may be
if you are,
expected to
if you,
rise more?
well, the principle of any exchange, stock, otherwise, commodities, for foreign exchange, if you like, is always buy low, sell high. So there's a crash now. We'll leave that really up to you. I'm not encouraging, discouraging. I'm not advising, nor disadvising. But the principle of any exchange is buy low and sell high.
All right. Okay. I think we have run out of time. Thank you very much, Shahzad, and that was a very interesting talk. And I think many of us who have watched it live now have found it very beneficial, and we have found we learned a lot from you. So thank you everyone for watching this BGRA talks, which we post monthly, and have a very happy remaining Sunday. Please continue to stay safe, and Fahran Rais signing off. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Encik Shahzad.
Thank you. Thank you, Farhan. Bye.